the U.S. government in 1922. It was only after pressure from some Americans that it decided to abandon its official neutrality and use the means and resources of its navy to save many innocents in Smyrna and Asia Minor. In 2020, an extensive table of U.S. Navy documents was published, showing the scale of this effort, along with new and unknown details of Turkish atrocities in Asia Minor. On the subject of the massacres in Smyrna, there are some historians, not only Turks, who maintain that the casualties among the civilians were only a few thousand and that all the killings were done by unruly miscreants or disobedient citizens who wanted to avenge the atrocities committed by the Greeks. As for the Big Fire, apart from the theories that the Greek army or Armenian nationalists were the arsonists, there is the opinion that the fire started by accident while Turkish soldiers were fighting against Armenian civilians. But let's look at the reality as it emerges in the accounts of eyewitnesses. On September 7, 1922, the Reverend S. Harlow, professor of history at the American College of Smyrna who had just arrived in New York, reported in an interview in the New York Times, "The Turks enjoy their massacres so much that they even go so far as to take official pictures of the torture and massacres. I had several such official photographs in my possession, which I handed over to an American consul to send to Washington. These depict the Turkish governor of a province, a Turkish general, senior clerics and other officials, dressed in their best, smiling as the executioner tortures the victims before their eyes." Orhan Reyber was a professor of botany, who in the fateful September of 1922 was in Smyrna. In his work New Light, he writes, "Instead of trying to put out the fire, the Turks, being in an absolute frenzy, strengthened it and directed it with oil." Kemal was no longer in control of his troops, and from that moment until Friday night, 15/9, the city was at the mercy of those with the most power and the least discipline. From what I saw and from the evidence I collected from both Turks and Greeks, only one conclusion can be drawn. The fire of Smyrna was the work of the Turks. George Horton summarizes the main facts about the Smyrna fire. The roads leading to the Armenian quarter were guarded by Turkish soldiers and no one was allowed to enter as the massacres were in progress. Armed Turks, among them many soldiers, entered the Armenian quarter looting, slaughtering and destroying. They placed small bombs under the cobblestones in the European part of the city, the so-called Fragomahala. These began to explode, as Turkish soldiers had sprinkled all around with oil that had started to ignite. One such bomb had been planted near the American School for Girls and another near the U.S. consulate. The Armenian quarter was set on fire on September 13, 1922. The last Greek soldiers passed through Smyrna on September 8, so the Turks occupied the city for 5 days. It was this fire that brought the Christians to the streets, causing the suffering that followed. The fire ignited at the edge of the Armenian quarter as a strong wind began to blow towards the Christian side and away from the Turkish side. The Turkish quarter remained unscathed by the fire, and during the martyrdom of the Christians, the Mohammedans danced, sang, feasted and celebrated in their brightly lit quarter. Turkish soldiers directed the fire towards the well-built, according to Horton, Greek and European quarters of Smyrna by dousing the narrow streets with oil or other flammable substances. They even poured oil in front of the American consulate, with the aim of spreading the fire to it too. However, there is also a telegram from the British Hull in which he writes, "A large number of Armenians were shot in cold blood by the Turks, and a continuous hunt followed. The women and children were herded into herds and taken away. In this connection, it is interesting to note that on the night of the fire, when ships were sent to evacuate refugees, among the 900 or so who were gathered in the destroyer, Serapis, there were not a dozen women between 15 and 35 years of age. The fire burned approximately 4 million square meters, and about 55,000 houses of Smyrna, of which 43,000 Greek, 10,000 Armenian and 2,000 foreign nationals. 5,000 shops were also incinerated, most of which were Greek. About 180,000 people lived in the area that was incinerated, the vast majority of them Greeks.